Hello, this is Simon Brew. I'm the editor of Film Stories magazine, and a very warm welcome to a really special episode of the Film Stories podcast.
Come with me.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
And movies that had stories.
That the story just sucks them in.
This is just the beginning.
Stories. We would be honored if you would join us.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to Film Stories with Simon Brew. I am Simon Brew, as always, that's all you need to know about me. The aim of the podcast is given away by the title. I'm here to talk of the stories of films, and I tend to talk about all sorts, really. Production stories, development stories, marketing stories, release stories, all the ingredients that go towards making the films that we know and sometimes love. Just that, the films that we know and sometimes love. The films I tend to cover on this podcast are a little more mainstreamy than anything else. They're films I'm interested in or invested in to some degree. I try not to do snark. I try not to punch down. This podcast is a celebration of cinema and a real appreciation of just how hard it is to get a film off the ground. Now, as I said at the start, this particular episode is a really, really special one for me because not only am I getting to talk about one of my absolute favourite Christmas movies, the recording you're about to hear took place after a live screening of the film. So let me just set this up a little bit. The film in question is 1995's In The Bleak Midwinter, if you're in the UK. If you're in the US, it was released as A Midwinter's Tale. Written and directed by Kenneth Branagh, he made it after Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and before he tackled Hamlet on the big screen. And this was, he described it once upon a time, as I say in the recording you're about to hear it, a hit and run film. This was a much smaller movie with a bunch of friends that he wrote and directed and didn't act in for the first time of his directorial efforts. Now, the cast includes Richard Bryars, Joan Collins, Nicholas Farrell, Mark Hadfield, Gerard Horan, Celia Imrie, Michael Maloney and Julia Sawalha. And so what happened on a really lovely Friday night in London, to a sold-out crowd, I managed to put on, with help from the brilliant Emma Turner and the film's associate producer Tamar Thomas, a really rare big screen outing for In The Bleak Midwinter. We got to see a brand new transfer of the film, and the film played an absolute treat. And then afterwards, well, we were joined by key people from the film who came on stage to chat about it. So what you're going to hear, and I do introduce them in the recording, but you're going to hear from the writer and the director of the film, Kenneth Branagh, as well as key members of his cast, Michael Maloney. You're going to hear from Nicholas Farrell, Mark Hadfield, Gerard Horan and Julia Sawalha. And we were all on stage in a line. Everyone gets to have their say here in the recording that you're about to hear. But I'm going to set all I think that's all the preamble you need, really. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the recording with a clip from the trailer for In The Bleak Midwinter, and then I'm going to jump straight to the film's finished. I'm introducing people to the stage, and you'll hear the conversation go from that point onwards. Hope you enjoy this. It was a really, really special night, and it's a really, really special film too.
Why must the show go on? It can't be all that indispensable.
The Hope Hamlet is a loser.
We have to do the show for them, and if you won't do it, then...
You should all be with your families.
We're actors.
Beggars.
This is it. Yes, I've got it now. This is right. Absolutely. I've got it.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I introduce some people to the stage for you? I'm going to introduce them one at a time so they can each get a mighty round of applause. We have Vernon in the audience. Mark Hadfield, please come up. A very nimble Vernon as well. We have Carnforth in the audience. Where's Gerard Horan? Promising as equally a buffer body as we've just seen on the screen, we have Tom Newman, Nicholas Farrell, ladies and gentlemen. We have the person who will call the shots. We have Joe Harper is with us, Michael Maloney, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully promising not to do a spectacular pratfall onto the stage. Nina Raymond is with it. Julia Sawalha, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, yeah, sorry, one other person. We have the writer and director, Kenneth Branagh. I'm going to try and start my timer. We have about half an hour with you to get as many of the stories of this as humanly possible. So, can we start at the far end? We've got Kenneth Branagh. This was you. I'm just curious, what inspired you in the first place to make and pay for a film yourself, as I understand it, about a man who turned down a major sci-fi movie and put on Hamlet instead?
First, can I say just first of all, thanks to everybody for coming. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you for supporting Centrepoint, the charity. It's an important one, and so you being here tonight makes a big difference. Thank you very much. We were, obsession and the idea of trying to make comedy within the world that we were familiar with, where people put lots of masks on to get through things, was happening at the same time as working a lot around that time on the play Hamlet. So the idea of something that was mirroring the story of Hamlet, but that could be hopefully with some humour and some heart, looking at what obsessives do as you try to put stories like this together, and how perspective is lost and kind of twisted out of shape in ways that at the time seemed to be part of just how it all works out, even though we eventually get a bit of perspective on the melodrama. It felt like that's good material potentially to try and make some comedy.
And if I've got this right, you were just coming off the back of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. You were heading into Hamlet afterwards, and so this was, I think you described it once upon a time as your first hit and run production.
Well, we didn't really know if the Hamlet was happening. We'd had a very kind of intense experience with the Frankenstein, but they paid me very nicely, thank you very much. And this was an opportunity to use, it's always been what I've been fortunate enough to do, is to, when you get some luck and maybe some cash, to be able to do something with a lot of people who I knew very well, some for the first time and everything, who I admired and who I felt, and I must say, I've got to say, but on a very personal level, I was so thrilled to see tonight that just how terrific you all were in the film. It was really just beautiful bits of acting I was very proud of. So I knew that was possibly going to happen, so I was very lucky, and I knew there were some people I'd love to work with who might do a wonderful job, and so they did.
So very little is actually known about the making of this film. I mean, there's a line in there about we reveal too much about the behind the scenes, but this is a film where so little has come out. The most I could find was a press kit issued by Sony Pictures Classics in 1996, and Julia, it said in that press kit that you signed on to this without reading the script. You got the offer and you were straight in. Is that right?
Did I?
That's what it said. I mean, I'm hoping you know better than me. How did it come to you? How did you get involved?
I knew there was Shakespeare involved. And I remember being my agent calling and saying, can you go and meet Ken Branagh for a film? This is a long time ago. And I was like, yes, I'll go. And I remember going and seeing Ken and being absolutely terrified, and he said, so what have you been doing with yourself? And I thought, oh no, please don't ask me that, because you always get asked that in castings. And I said, I said, I've just finished Pride and Prejudice, and he said, of which you were wonderful in. And at that moment, I sort of don't remember anything else. Because he really meant it. He was really genuine, and he really put me at ease. And I saw another actor talking to an actress. Or I call myself an actress, sorry. And so with regard to reading the script, I can't remember. I think someone my age, at the point in my career, I think if you get a call for a meeting with Kenneth Branagh, you don't really need to read this script, because you want to work with him. Really. I mean, there would be some people that I wouldn't go and meet. So that sounds like no.
And the physical comedy, I mean, it looked incredibly painful, that fall.
Well, I won't ruin the mystery. I couldn't envision it, and I didn't understand how it was going to happen. And I remember I was dreading doing that thing where I come down the aisle, and I had always had really bad imposter syndrome as an actress, and it was moving up a level each job I did. And by the time I got to this job, it was at its height. And I remember Ken always saying, "Put the whip away." Did you say, was it put the...
Very probably.
Put the whip away. Stop lashing yourself. Put the whip away, darling. I'd see him give notes to people and say, put the wooden baton away or something. And stop lashing yourself. And I realised that was the imposter stopping me from going deeper and wider with my creativity. And I remember sort of saying to Ken, much like the scene when I was asking Michael about how I was going to perform that bit, I said to Ken, how far shall I go? What shall I do? And he said, just go for it. Just do it. And I thought, oh God. And I thought, if I'm not prepared to make a fool of myself here, then there's no point me being here. The imposter is gone, and he's not going to lash me. And I've been hiding behind an imposter so that I couldn't go deeper with my creativity. And he helped me tap into an area of creativity which I have carried with me for the rest of my career. So I went up the back and just went nuts.
Spectacularly so, if I can say. Michael, you'd worked with Ken before at this stage.
I had.
What was the pitch to you? Because obviously a very pivotal role, and I think some at the time were saying you were channeling your director a little bit.
Oh, well, maybe. I'd just done a production of Romeo and Juliet in America where I directed it, and so I used a lot of that sort of bonkers behaviour that I had there. But what happened was that it was very, very much out of the blue. You wanted to do a play reading. You wanted to do a reading of the play to see how it went. And so we all met in someone's house. I believe it was Jerry's and Tamar's house. Yeah, exactly. And we did this read through at the rate of knots because everybody was thinking knots. And then magically, and you all always dream of this as an actor. Ken came up afterwards and said, "We're going to make it into a film. I want you." I said, "Thank you very much." And that's it. And every audition should be that way. And so that's, I didn't know any of this. That's how it started. With a run through some Talos act.
Yeah.
In the front.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
They very kindly, but then I remember had made sandwiches and everything. all sorts in the kitchen for afterwards. Yeah.
What were the sandwiches? I mean,
Very nice. A secret recipe. They'd have to kill you.
We don't want to.
Pull aside the veil too far.
And Nicholas, I mean, you looked spectacular on screen. I mean, there's no two ways about that. I gather. Well, of course. A shared dressing room at the RSC is what I got. Is how you and Ken crossed over the first. So again, if you could just explain how you came to it.
We were, funnily enough, we were in a production of Hamlet, and Ken was Laertes, and I was Horatio, and it was a very happy time, interesting production. Brian Blessed was in it, but certainly made it interesting. And was just thrilled like everybody else, I guess, when Ken asked me if I'd like to be Tom Newman. And I just remember lots of fun. I'd forgotten how incredibly effective the ensemble close-up can be in film, which we had quite a lot of. I mean, if you cast your mind back, there are quite a lot of scenes where there are about 7 or 8 characters all in the frame, which you don't often see.
And a veiled way of complaining you didn't get enough plasma.
I didn't think it was veiled at all. For instance, I think it's the scene before the read through, and everybody's sitting around that very long table, and Ken brilliantly did it with putting the camera on some tracks and slowly moving up, and it took in all the dialogue. And I mean, that kind of scene, sitting around a long table, if you're doing a television or a major film with that number of people sitting around a long table, it usually takes about a day and a half to film. And we probably did it in an hour and a half.
I tell you, that was also only possible, going back to a bit about how it started, because this group of actors were all, it wasn't even an issue of not sharing the, knocking the ball back to each other and being on cue and listening and rising to that kind of thing and finding it fun. I mean, finding it fun, or at least this was my recollection, that it was, because, it was probably clear enough, or maybe there was evidence already, that there would be close-ups and different kinds of, coverage, but those were the kinds of ways of doing it that were a positive, creative choice that I thought would also make the film distinct, and I knew that no one would be slowing things down, everybody would be sharply on it, and it was, you also, with those kind of shots, have a sort of limit to, maybe they go to 7 takes or something, because it's the first or second one may have a little something, but you can feel, at least I felt and remember feeling, that this sort of group of actors there was a pride and a kind of zing about it. It wasn't necessarily trying to make it theatrical, still trying to be real within the context of a sort of heightened style, if you like, but it was something that I could only attempt because, this group were really ready to do it. So that was, as a director, that was a big treat to that generosity and sort of technical skill as well.
So would it be fair to say, when you came to Murder on the Orient Express, we owe the enormous table that came out of the train in that film to that particular scene in The Bleak Midwinter?
Very much so.
Absolutely wonderful.
This is the reason why.
I mean, Gerard, if I can come to you, you've had an extraordinary career. You've done productions of all sizes, but I understand you too got to know Ken through Renaissance Theatre Company, and by the sounds of it, it was in your house that the sandwiches were served up, and the origins of this fire.
Well, I'm first met Ken when I was a raven-haired beauty of 19.
You're still a raven-haired beauty.
At Gerard, he was a couple of terms ahead of me, and we didn't work together as such then, obviously, because he was ahead of me, but we worked a couple of years later. Renaissance's first proper Renaissance Theatre Company's first proper show at the Lyric Hammersmith, and we became friends properly, I guess, through working together. And then, a few years later, Tamar and I were, Ken needed someone to do it, so we'll just do it our hands up, I think we made chili, actually. We've still got the pot. We bought, how many people are there? 18 or something. Because other folks came who weren't, in front of the camera. So, I think we've still got an enormous stock pot that we bought specifically so we could cater for so many people. We subsequently worked on, done theatre, lucky enough to travel around the world doing King Lear and Midsummer Night's Dream with the wonderful Richard Briers. And we are still at it, all of us, against all the odds.
It is really strange for 30 years on, because I was sat watching you all watching the film, and I met you all just before, and to have an ensemble who still get on, it feels like quite a sort of Let's get to the bitchy stuff then. I'll hand it over to you right now. But that feels quite special.
It's a great privilege to be employed doing any kind of decent work, but it's an even greater privilege to spend that time with people you love and admire, and I've had that privilege more than once because of Ken, and this job was an exemplar. I mean, we didn't stop laughing from that reading in our house, I think, just titting about really from weeks on end. And I have a memory that we did see, you showed us an assembly which, with a fully assembled which ran to about 6 hours, I think. But there was a lot of very, very, very good material that had to go. But we all got to see everyone else's. You know, 'cause obviously you're not in every scene with everybody, so it was a great treat to see other people's work that maybe didn't always make it to the final cut. But it was a lovely job.
We'll come to the Release the Branagh Cup campaign shortly. But Mark, let's bring you into the conversation. How did you get involved in all of it?
I just remember Ken saying one day that he was going to go away for a week, isolated, I think in somewhere like Wales or Lake District, and he said, I'm going to write. And literally a week later, he came back and said, I've written this script, which he must have just vomited out, because you felt it was so much of his longing and yearning for how Shakespeare relates to the common man, and how actors can embrace themselves, each other, and a work like Hamlet, and make it something that is so universally understood. And when I read it, I think it was probably a bit later on, I just thought this was a wonderful piece of work. And we had just, I'd been very luckily been involved in Frankenstein. But Ken and I go back 40 odd years. We both at Gerard at the same time. But what I loved about the whole thing was that even though he was writing from himself, he actually tapped into personalities of the people he knew he wanted to be in the film. So there's little bits of all of us revealed. Our insecurities, our pompousness, and our infidelities and all that sort of thing. It's just sort of a very honest portrayal of what actors are like, and how bringing them together as a family can produce such a wonderful piece of work, and something that everyone can enjoy.
I'm fascinated by you all received a screenplay with Ken's interpretation of what you all were. Were there any of you where, let's just say, it hit a little bit close to the bone? Let's do it the charitable way.
Well, Ken's a wonderful observer of people.
That's so yes, isn't it?
I mean, he's honest and generous.
I was delighted that Ken had given me a part that gave me the sort of stretch of my career, probably. It was so unlike anything.
Well, you gave it 132%. That's pre-apprentice as well. That was going. A lot of accents in there as well.
I didn't know what you're talking about.
So, I mean, Julia, say the script that you received, how different was that from what was seen in the end? Because there's been some implying that there was a little bit of, let's just say, titting about, I believe was the phrase, and that there was a 6-hour version of what you shot. So even if that's like double what it actually was, it strikes me there's quite a lot that didn't make it to the script. So what wasn't in the script that you saw there? What were the kind of things that were also cut out?
I really have to be honest, I can't remember.
I didn't remember these.
You?
Most of my bits, I think.
we met for a week beforehand, didn't we? And we rehearsed and we chatted. And if there were stories that the characters had to tell, like the loss of your husband, for instance, and we found similarities. What had happened to you? What have you done for yourself? Have you done anything? And so on. And you had brought stories, and you took stories that we told and wrote them into the.
Yeah, I think I seem to remember that, but seem also to remember that it's sort of it's very natural. I can never, and I mean this genuinely, never quite work out whose idea was whose. You know, that if something seemed to work for a scene, it might have come from some shared moment. I always feel actors have got very, very good instincts about how to deliver comedy or what, you know. These are all very amazing to see Marky do the little shuffle around the coming in and do this little thing. I think we just said, Marky, if I keep the kid, can you? Something about the way he moves. So I sort of left it to his nibs, and he came in. It makes you, it tickles the bejesus out of you. And then I also remember that there were just moments where I thought probably you do it beautifully with your man there and everything. They all do. Where maybe in the context of a story like this, suddenly that slightly, at least the intention was, and for me it was, and it was entirely performance led really, where you're suddenly affected a bit more than you really should be by a daft comedy set at Christmas about actors suddenly has, because of the sort of, the concentration or the presence or whatever it is, like when you tell them about your husband and everything, you feel it's on a little, I'm not making great claims for the picture in this way, but there's a little knife edge between what, on some level we were trying to present in a way as a film, as a kind of farce. It's quite high level, quite high octane, people speak quickly, etc. And then when they can flip it and suddenly go, I'm rather surprised and affected by this rather natural reveal of a slightly fragile heart, being able tonally to see if that was possible. That's also what I really, really enjoyed about working with everybody on, because they were very, very deft with that. And of course, in the context of even 93 minutes, it's pretty hard to play at an only relentless, fast energy. That some light and shade and contrast has to happen, and so it was very, 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 very enjoyable to see people take those opportunities and be, as I felt tonight watching. Oh, gosh, that seems very, believable and touching. And
you suggested that though, that scene on the bench.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I was doing something awful, and you kept. I think you were trying to get me to internalise, which I'm dreadful at. And I remember doing it again. I never forget doing that scene. I remember doing it again and again, and you would just, you brought the reality into that. Whenever I watched that, so I found it difficult. I thought, oh no, I'm not getting it right. I'm not understanding you. And you just very gently chipped away at all the nonsense that I was obviously doing.
Well, no nonsense, but definitely.
See what he does? No nonsense.
but I think the sometimes, it's hard on the pace to go. But in another scene, I'm going to be running down a church and falling flat, and doing a big splat X thing, which feels like it's sort of from aren't they both from different films? So then to sort of go, but this is we're going to get surprised, and then it's so. There's a few moments that are so touching with the sort of simplicity which you can maybe get. I think everybody had moments like that where you go, Marky does that and then kills you with a line at the end of another scene, and that was very in that the sort of range of it as a director. It's pretty rewarding. You say chipping away. I would say, look, we were just working on the scene, and then you got to that bit. When you got to that bit, the first one was perfectly fine, and then 7 was slightly different. And we decided in the edit to go for this thing. It could take it, and you delivered, and we had it. So it was very. I really love watching actors do that. It's very nice to be close to them when they're at that, because they're quite, you can get a bit scared, and you think about schedules and people watching the clock. But all the greats that I've worked with create time. They always, not to name drop, but just because he's got this great film this year. Chris Nolan is a good example of somebody who, even when the circus of what's happening in the scene happens, it's as if it all stops. So I feel as I learned at least the attempt to try and say, in the end, we're going to be, if we remember this, it'll be because of what that character's impact is. So we have to have time, even if the ship is there, or the storm is there, or the explosions are there, etc. And I admire people in our field of environment sport when they can do that. But suddenly they do something different to time, and actors respond very, very well to that if they're given the opportunity.
If I can come a little bit further up this end of the line, then, you talked there about there was a week before you started shooting this, and by the looks of this was not a luxury trailer production. Right, you giggled at that. So straight in there, Gerard. What was the setup? I mean, did he just put you in a church hall with a bad bottle of wine?
Well, no wine, darling. My memory is that there was a sort of we were all in the church that we shot in, and there were little sort of dressing areas carved out for each of us within the building.
It was a disused convent, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was an old convent chapel.
It had been converted very nicely into these. We all had our own little cell.
Yeah, yeah, they were. There was
with a bed and everything in. I mean, we were well looked after, but we were in this space. So
but also, I think, if I'm right, none of us would come in the morning and get changed in those cells. And then the rest of the time, we would all. Nobody retreated. I have no memory of anyone going, well, I'm not on for another hour and a half now. I'm going to go off to my dressing room, or my little cell. I think we all, whenever we weren't on, we would just come back and continue whatever daft anecdote.
But there was a common room.
There was a kind of green room, common room, yeah. With a big table, and we never, we just spent the whole time around that.
Yeah. So how long were you shooting it for then? How long did you have?
It was
3-4 weeks?
5 weeks.
5 weeks.
5 weeks.
The other
thing
together.
Yeah.
In little sort of, little pods.
And I mean, the camaraderie, presumably as a result of that, is what we see on the screen. Do you have particularly fond memories of the shoot? Because it just looked cold as well. Just on a temperature level from where I'm sat, that looked freezing.
Well, luckily we all kind of knew each other beforehand. So that helped. And of course, when you've got Richard Bryars and John Sessions, bless their hearts, on set, you really didn't get much of a word in there at all. And so you've got like a free entertainment as well. So we've got, bed and board and entertainment. It's like being on a cruise ship.
I mean, I do want to come to Richard Bryars and John Sessions, sadly no longer with us, but what spectacular moments on the screen. And I found this quote from Richard Bryars on how Henry was pitched to him. His eternal complaining, said Richard Bryars, is certainly based on Ken's experience on sharing a dressing room with me on a world tour. Would there be some... And John Sessions actually talked about how the campery of the character of Terry was the cloak of protection for that character as well. There's some really lovely writing on them. I mean, can you talk about working with those two? Because, clearly very, very special performances.
You want me to do the whole... Mike, talk about Johnny and...
Do you want to tell that story on the first night of King Lear in Tokyo? Before he went to go on, and what did he say?
Well, we were sat next to each other, and the call came over, Mr. Bright. This is your 5-minute call, and he was having a roll up, and
he was playing King Lear.
He was playing King Lear, and the crown was at a racy angle, and he sat there. He hadn't said anything. I didn't want to say anything because he was going on to play King Lear, and then he had that call, and then he just straightened the crown, and then he turned to me. I thought he was going to say something very important and profound, and he just looked at me and said, "I fucking hate acting." Which, frankly, was kind of profound because he was very good, and you just felt all of that thing. One thing I say, one of the greatest things that ever happened to me in my career was that everybody on this, I don't say this to sort of blow trumpet, it's just the way it went. Everybody got paid the same money. So they got paid the same money as Joan Collins, as the drivers, as the caterers, as the Sparks. And we managed to sell the film for just a little bit more than we paid for it. So on the day when we had a cast and crew screening, I remember we set a little table up outside, and everybody participated with the idea if they had some, whatever it was, 0.0 percentage or whatever, they had a sort of pro rata. If there were distinguished people who'd been doing it for years, that a bit more than somebody who hadn't been doing it for long, whatever. But anyway, literally everybody had a tiny percentage point in the movie. The town will remember this because we was a lot of time ahead of time filling the envelopes, and as they came out of the cast and crew screening, we gave them a check. We get everybody. Everybody. It was like you had to line up, and they'd seen the show, and now they were getting the bonus thing, which was an unbelievable thrill and a proper thank you, because of course it was great and we had a terrific time, but we were enabled by our colleagues and collaborators and everybody who put an equal amount of effort into it. So it was, I felt God bless Castle Rock for, as it were, letting us financially wipe our face and then divvy up what was left. And that was a really, it's never happened before or since, but it was a beautiful moment to see the look of all the people who were the jaws on the floor, the brilliant, glamorous and unbelievable, indefatigable and beautiful Joan Collins. I was completely and utterly speechless.
Are you saying you just gave Joan Collins a brown envelope?
We did, yeah. It was like my dad was working. I remember it was in a brown envelope was the kind of proof that you've done an honest day's work for an honest day's pay. So the idea that I think it was checks for some people and some hard, some folding money for others. But one way or another, it was we were able to follow through on something that we appreciated. Was we didn't. It was. Listen, it's nice when things go well sometimes. And it's very nice to be able to share it like that. And it was so appreciated as well at the time. And then that was the universe did us a bit of a favour, and we were most grateful to be able to help it out with where the cash was going.
It's worth saying, actually, as well, as Ken just mentioned, part of the atmosphere of making it was that everybody had a vested interest, in the broadest possible sense. So that everybody that was there, not just the actors, the crew, every member of the crew, down to the drivers, everybody was a part of it in a proper invested sense. So it was the most properly collaborative project in that sense that I've ever been involved in, and it makes you wish it would be possible to do that kind of thing more frequently, because people genuinely will listen. People will listen to who maybe wouldn't be listened to. Everyone's opinions mattered and were listened to and considered, and it was a really thrilling environment that to work in.
And Nicholas, would you say that this kind of thing feels like a one-off? Because I read, for instance, I could have picked anyone's CV here, and it's an extraordinary list of things. Has there been a project quite like this that you've done before?
No. In a word, no. It was. I mean, there was. I don't know. Just because I haven't watched the film for decades, and just seeing it again, I just said to Julia, it's as if. I think naivety is the wrong word, but there's a sort of innocence to it that comes across. And I think that we all, probably not realising at the time, but thinking back, I mean, we did all get, as has been said, we all got on really well, and we just had a ball. It was such fun. And it was cold. Actually.
Thank you. I didn't think I was going back.
I remember one morning it actually started snowing, and I remember Ken saying to me, "Look, there's the little second unit camera, and they're just they've got a bit of time. If you want to go off in the snow and do something as Tom." And I could never find his bloody second unit. Because I thought it'd be lovely to have Tom trying to do some yoga or something in the snow, and then realising it was too cold and I got back into the church again. But it was just a very happy time. And certainly now I haven't done anything else like it before or since.
Our time is running a little short, but what I wanted each of you to do, if this is okay, as I understand it, this is the first time you've all been together watching the film since the Venice Film Festival in '95, I think it was. Can we just go down the line and just tell, because again, I was watching you watch the film, and the reaction from each of you was quite extraordinary. Can you just kind of encapsulate what it's like to see just that slice of your life all this time later? I'll start this there, Mark.
Oh my God.
I'll give you the easy question.
Yeah. Well, it's wonderful to see us all together again and see how over 30 years
Nothing's changed. We all
look marvellous as always. But it's just wonderful to see how, as I think Nick just said, about there was a naivety and innocence about doing the film, which we all embraced and enjoyed. And it's just so interesting to see what people have done subsequently and where we are now. Excuse me. And the way we relate to it now. I mean, I relate to it now as the same way I did when I first saw it. I've seen it several times over the last
decades, and I'm always surprised and thrilled to see that people I know and love put together such a wonderful piece of work. And I'm always very thrilled when people come up to me and say, In the Bleak Midwinter is one of my favourite films ever. And I just think that's a wonderful thing, because we had no idea that was going to be the outcome. We just wanted to make a really nice film, written by a brilliant writer and director, and put together by a brilliant cast and crew, and the wonderful Tamar Thomas, whose first venture into producing it was. And we got away with it.
So, Gerard, had you seen it fairly regularly? Are you someone who watches it fairly regularly?
Shit, we've all got to do one.
Yeah.
Come on, it was raining. I feel remarkably, this sounds such nonsense, lucky to have been involved. You know, I worked with Richard Byers, Kenneth Branagh, this bunch, Joan bloody Collins. I mean, it was such a treat, and I'm very sad as well to see the people that we missed and loved. There's lovely Teddy Dewsbury who's there at the end, Annie Davis, Robert Hines. It's slightly bittersweet to see it get to that, but it's how lucky we were. How lucky we were.
There were a couple of details actually I spotted when you've got John Sessions and Richard Byers underneath Muppet duvets. Who was in charge of the duvets? Where did that? And then was it just me, or was Joan Collins exercising next to a tomato ketchup bottle?
Eating chips.
Whoever was in charge of duvets, full credit to them. Nicholas, what's your recollection? How do you feel when you see it now?
Well, I think it holds up rather well. I think it's still good, which is because not everything that one's been in sort of stands up necessarily, but I think this does, and I just really enjoyed it. I wasn't quite sure. I thought I probably would enjoy it, but I'd forgotten so much about it.
Quite good. I mean, it's a reviewer's panel and a half, this is, isn't it? 6 out of 10's down the line. Michael, how do you feel? Can you pop the mic to?
Sorry, I thought I was very moving. I really did. I was beyond moved at the time. So, to seeing people we lost and people that I'm still with. I realised that depression is a big currency now. We talk about depression and stuff like that. But these people and us actually wanting to become actors, being at drama school, not knowing what was to come. But getting depressed, taking life incredibly seriously, and coming a cropper time and time again, and that still happens professionally, and getting incredibly depressed. And we're lucky to have Ken, who just reminds you that we needn't take ourselves that seriously. Is that you do have the ability to laugh at yourself as well. And I do remember doing some publicity in Canada, and a Canadian critic going, "Why are you making fun of these people? This is a serious story. Why are you doing?" But it is our ability to laugh at ourselves that keep us going, really. And I had to remind myself of that, and some of the very funny banter that went on in the green room. As a result, buoying us all up and keeping us going. And to make a joke even at the worst of times. That's a great knack, I think, that we got given, we had. I think we probably all have it. And Julia?
The first time I saw it, I thought it was just brilliant. Which is really hard when you've been in something to look at it objectively. And I think, as Nick said, it stood the test of time. And my face was aching the whole way through. And so many funny lines, and so just actors depicted perfectly. All of what you see happens in our lives. It does, doesn't it? And yes, to work with Richard Byers and John Sessions, and there is, that's emotional to see them up there and just to be reminded of how honoured and lucky I was, we are, and how much I learned on that job. It was a golden job for me. Working with everybody and working with Ken, everything I learned from Ken I have taken with me, carried with me, and shared it with others. And I've name dropped again and again. I've said I got taught that by Kenneth Branagh, and then people take me seriously. And so I just sat there feeling extraordinarily happy.
And Ken, perhaps we can end with you. If you can kind of round this up for us and give us the exclusive about the sequel.
We've thought about it before, you know. I always thought there was I mean, who knows whether much of the world is ready for it, but that there would be a quartet film. I had the titles for them, so it would be In the Bleak Midwinter, Spring Breaks, Summer Storms, and Autumn Leaves. It's over again. I don't say that. I mean, not everybody comes back, but anyway, that's another. They're all available. That's another thing. But practically, but yeah. So there's something about you do feel. I've got to be interesting. It'd be interesting when we put all these people together. It'd be interesting to have. Wouldn't just be interesting. It'd be such great fun. I said to Mrs. Lindsay before we got here tonight, I said, God, it's a bit nerve-wracking this because what if nobody laughs? That would be not so good. And so thank you very much again by way of rounding things up. Whether you were pitying me or not, please thank you very much for your kind indulgence. To see it again, a bit like, obviously very, very emotional to see Johnny and Dickie, who we love very much. They were typical. But Johnny's so beautiful in the scene with the sun, so beautiful, such simplicity, and with Dickie, that curmudgeon that Michael reminded us of with that like moment Japan and what Dickie said about so-called inspiration. But again, you felt this sort of compassion and heart. So. There was, for me, watching it, actually, I was very, very grateful people laughed, but I was very, very touched to be reminded of the sort of the heart, the ability of these actors and the generosity of them to just simply be saying simple things which maybe we say lots of times or don't say or can sound a bit trite, or in the crazy business of human relationships and all the rest of it, where we make big mistakes and sometimes we got an insight and then we walk backwards, and sometimes we've got something else to say. We fall down, we get up, we fall down, we get up, whatever. But there's something about in the performances that felt both daft, lunatic, kind, and honest, with ambition, creative ambition, but without pretension, was what I felt from. I'm talking about the performances, the whole thing. You may feel differently about, but I was pleased to see that hang on in a way that was very, to me, very touching. Like in that sense, no real sense of ownership about it because I felt it was a shared thing. But I once again, as I did on the day, very much admired and would say once again would say thank you very much to all of you for being such beautiful comrades and colleagues in it. And Simon, thank you also very, very much. This man has been very patient over many years trying to get us lot together to have a screening for people who might be interested. Again, thank you very much. And so thank you for your patience and persistence and kindness, and all the people here and at Centrepoint and everybody who tried to make this happen. So I think that's a call from your agent. You must take it. You must take it. And I told you, not everybody's coming back.
You've been offered the lead in a sci-fi trilogy.
Thank you. Just to remind me to take some medication.
Can I just have, for the record, and we have 100 or so witnesses here, I asked for one sequel and he's just offered you all three. That's the way it works. You made a bit of money off Belfast, right? Well, so here we go.
No. I also thought, you think I'm not being serious about this, but Mike and Nick will tell you, because we've sat, and Marky, we've all sat, we often go to the football together, and I remember an afternoon when we started putting that together, they looked at me like, you're not serious, but I said, well, you know what? There's a sort of, maybe it's not. Maybe we don't get 3 more feature films out of it, but maybe there's a little. I always like portmanteau films, as they say. You know, there's a great portmanteau film you'll be aware of. Where the most famous of the films in it is Dead of Night. Do you know that picture of Michael Redgrave, and he's got the ventriloquist dummy, and it's in the context of a bunch of other stories. So it's half a Cavalcanti is the director of that. Anyway, so there's this, and then I think maybe there's a picture with the 3, you know, those 3 titles. So now all we have to do is, if we can all, because Joe's not the only one, if we can all keep taking our medication, we might well be able to, you know, get to part 2.
So, first and foremost, Dead of Night, if you don't know it, has the best novelty golf shot in 1940s cinema in it. Yeah. Incredible. It's better than the ventriloquist dummy bit. Secondly, you didn't say no. Just to be clear, I'm going to hammer this point home.
Definitely did not say no.
Definitely did. So just to get a flavour of the audience here, if this bunch can come back together and make a sequel to this, are you all going to watch it? Please.
I was going to say, it might not be in a church, but it might be in a rest home.
They're warmer. I doubt it.
This would be warm.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to wrap things up. I will ask, please, can you allow our party to depart the screening first, just to give them a head start? But individually, can we have a round of applause for Mark Hadfield? For Gerard Horan? For Nicholas Farrell? For Michael Maloney? For Julia Sawalha, for Tamar Thomas sat in the front row and avoiding the glare, and for the man who, after years of asking, finally said yes, Kenneth Branagh.
Thank you. Merry Christmas, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And there you have it, the end of a really wonderful evening, including the exclusive news that further instalments potentially are in development for those who, like me, really, really adore the film. As you heard in the recording there, it was something I've been trying to get off the ground. I think I sent the first correspondence about all of this back in 2018. My huge thanks to Tamar Thomas for ultimately making this happen for us and for not telling me to go away, and for Emma Turner for putting on the event at the Picturehouse Central venue. Much, much appreciated. And that brings to an end this very special episode of Film Stories. Just a few little plugs and notices, if you don't mind. I produce print magazines, independent film print magazines. You can find them at store.filmstories.co.uk. There's one that's just for young film fans. It's called Film Junior, and really, really proud of it that youngsters get to write it and are paid for it as well. And I don't think there's a magazine out there that's like it. And then we've got Film Stories, 168 pages each issue, a heavy focus on British film as well. You can find both of those at store.filmstories.co.uk. You can find Film Stories website at filmstories.co.uk. That's updated with movie news, reviews, features, non-clickbait, non-AI. We're trying really hard to do this properly, which is very, very uphill. But again, if that's something you can support, much appreciated. If you want to support this podcast, there are 3 main ways other than lending it your ears you can do through which you can do so. You can support it financially by going to patreon.com/SimonBrew. You get the podcast early, you get it ad-free, and you find out behind the scenes gossip. You certainly got the heads up on the tickets for the show that I've just played details of. If you can leave a review at your podcast home of choice, that costs you nothing and is hugely, hugely appreciated. And likewise, if you can subscribe to the podcast, it's those things that make a real difference to independent podcasts such as this. But I think that's enough from me. I think you've heard far more than anyone would ever want to hear from me over the past year. Thank you to everybody who's supported Film Stories. We may just have one more special episode to come before 2023's out. If I don't quite get that over the line, thank you for all of your support. I'm wishing you a really lovely Christmas, a really lovely New Year. I hope life finds, no matter what you're going through at this time of year, assuming you're listening to this around Christmas, I hope there's a smile in it for you somewhere. Take care, the very best. Bye-bye.